Welcome back to another episode of DEC Does What? I'm Sean Mahar along with
Erica Ringwald.
And it's Forest Ranger Friday here on the podcast. It is a Friday while we're recording this, and we're here with some of our awesome Forest Rangers talking all things that they do, but most importantly, talking about the state's burn ban that is in place right now through mid-May coming up. But Erica, who do we have on the show today?
We've got Forest Ranger Captain Nancy Ganswindt. The T is silent. And Forest Ranger Chuck Kabrehl. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks. Chuck, Nancy, thanks for being on the show today. We're excited to go down the pathway of all that is the New York State Forest Ranger Force that we have here at DEC. It's really an exciting unit in particular, but one of the real key things that, especially this time of year, that's really important is the wildland firefighting activities that our forest rangers do. As we speak right now, we've had a New Jersey wildland fire that's been burning, causing some air quality impacts here in New York.
15,000 acres.
It's a big one. And Erica, you've been sending our daily air quality advisory alerts internal to make sure we know what we're tracking for.
Yes, and if you want to check out the air quality in your area, there's really only two good sources to go to. One is the DEC website for our daily air quality forecast. The other is hosted by our partners at the US EPA, and it's called airnow.gov.
That's right. So check that out. But in the meantime, people don't think of New York as being a wildfire state, but here we are. And obviously we had the Jennings Creek fire back in the fall. We have hundreds of wildfires that actually burn in New York throughout the state seasonally. And we have a burn ban that's in effect. So Nancy, Chuck, talk to us a little bit about the burn ban and why it's important for people to follow.
Well, the burn ban is really important because prior to the implementation of the spring burn ban, brush burning was a primary cause for spring wildland fires. In New York State, like you said, we do have a very active fire regime in New York State. Our burn windows tend to be a spring fire season and a fall fire season. So by enacting and enforcing that burn ban, we've really limited the number of fires that occur in the spring.
What are the primary causes of brush fires now?
They have a wide range of causes. People are still burning brush and not following the burn ban. That's where our enforcement comes in. Illegal burning of garbage, where we might have our conservation officers respond. Anything from a campfire that gets out of hand and people leave it unattended. There's power lines. Chuck was on a wildland fire last night that was caused by a down power line. So there's a lot of different causes of fires.
So what's it like to fight a wildland fire? I mean, it sounds like very dangerous. And obviously you think of thousands of acres that could potentially ignite. What's it like to be on the front lines of fighting a wildfire?
It's pretty awesome.
I'd assume so.
No, it's a lot of fun.
Chuck, I will say, you were fighting a fire last night, but I don't smell that on you right now in the podcast room.
Well, I showered. It changed out of my Nomex. I think my wife would attest that I smelled differently last night, but so fighting fire is great.
That's fine. That's great.
So what it's like to fight a wildland fire is it's a lot of hard work. So there's a lot of things I think that people don't really anticipate about fire. There's a bit of a perception, I think, that water, helicopters and engines put out wildland fire. But really what puts out wildland fire is removing one of the legs of the fire triangle, either fuel, heat, fuel, or oxygen. And really, generally, the way we do that is by removing available fuel, by either digging a fire line, either could be by leaves, raking a line, could be digging a line, or a lot of times we'll do that by utilizing existing barriers like roads, trails that may already exist, just with a little improvement, and then using fire to burn out those areas so that we can have a controlled situation where the fire hits the line, and by removing that available fuel, we put fires out that way. So it takes a lot. There's a lot of planning involved. There's a lot of hard physical work involved, and there's a lot of kind of fun decision making under stressful situations.
So when you're on a fire, I mean, these are obviously remote areas. Are you like hiking miles into the woods to fight these things? Are you getting like aerial dropped into the backcountry in places? Like, how does that actually work?
Yeah, every situation is different. We have lowered forest rangers in by helicopter before. We have hiked it on foot. That's more likely the case. A helicopter tends to be a higher risk that we try to avoid when we can. But just like Chuck said, it's just very physically demanding, labor intensive, and it can be tedious. And we had a fire remote. We were actually talking about it earlier today in Farrow Lake Wilderness several years ago. That was very remote, and it took a while to get to the fire before we could even start fighting it.
That is one of my favorite places to go in the Adirondacks. Love that area too.
So I know that we regularly deploy forest rangers to respond to fires in other states and sometimes nations too. Can you talk a little bit about what you get out of those experiences and how they, help sort of build the skills of the rangers?
Yeah, it's a great opportunity that we are afforded, and we will send forest rangers out to California, down south for really wherever it's needed. And Chuck and I have been on 2 fire deployments together, one to California and one to Washington State. And really, the most invaluable thing that we get out of it is the experience of being on a large scale incident. We get to network with other organizations, other states, and we really bring that knowledge that we learn on these large scale incidents back to New York so we can implement them here. And the experience is invaluable. Rangers learn a lot of very useful tactics and techniques, and get a really good working knowledge of the incident command system.
And I think something else that we gain from these out-of-state experiences is leadership in high-intensity situations. So we do have, unfortunately, we do occasionally have catastrophic wildfires in New York State. We have large, really active fires, but it's great for the people who fight fires in New York to build that experience helping other areas so that when that happens locally, we have people on hand that are comfortable in that situation, who've been there, who've seen it, and have had to make tactical and strategic decisions under extreme circumstances, and are comfortable enough to do so. There really isn't a lot of time during an active fire. There is not a lot of time to sit and think and come up with a long game plan. So it's really helpful to have people who know what to do, know how it's going to go, know what resources they need, and are able to think 2 or 3 plans out and kind of have backup plans ready.
So, what's your wildest wildland firefighting story in the state that you've been
Great
a part
setup.
of?
My first ever wildfire experience was about a week out of my academy. I was still
Trial
on
by fire, right
exactly.
there.
Yes, I was still on field training, and I was assigned to Region 3. And my field training was, a week and a half, 2 weeks on a fire that was about 100 acres, and that was the best way to learn. And it was a very memorable experience for me.
Chuck, do you have any awesome experiences that you can think of?
I have a lot of awesome
I know
experiences.
you were on one last night, right?
Yeah, well, last night I was just on, I would say not huge, but a 14-acre fire started by power lines. It was a really great operation. We got on it quickly. A couple fire departments were already on scene, started to work there. And we had enough rangers showed up, and we were able to really quickly come up with a great plan to burn out the east and southern flanks of that fire utilizing existing roads. Caught the burn window right. The burn went perfectly. Very little mop up. It was just one of those great operations that, just went perfectly and you feel really good about it.
I know that the Rangers conduct a lot of trainings for volunteer fire departments and other sort of responders, specifically in wildland fire response. Can you tell us a little bit about how that's different from responding to a typical structure fire?
So I think one of the main differences is, it's just a totally different thing. So wildland fire training doesn't really translate to structural fire and vice versa. So I would be of almost no use to anybody on structural fire. I have no training in that. I don't have the equipment to fight that sort of fire. And I guess I could help with traffic control, but I don't really have any usefulness on that kind of incident. So it's a totally different discipline. And that's not to say that structural firefighters aren't a huge help for us, because they absolutely are. Volunteer fire departments almost always get the call first. They're almost always the first ones on scene. And honestly, a large number of wildland fires are extinguished before we even get there by the volunteers, because they're either small or they're easy to get to. And those folks do a tremendous amount of work. That helps us out a lot. But it's also great to have a trained source of help for the longer duration fire. So typically in the initial response, the volunteer fire companies will do a lot of work, and then we sort of take over because they're volunteers and people's houses may be, under threat from fires, and we want them to be available to take care of that stuff. So as incidents continue in duration, that's where we take over.
Yeah, and one of the great things about the forest ranger job is that we live in the communities in which we work, and we are able to build really strong relationships with those local volunteer fire departments, and that those relationships are what help us when we do need, assistance on wildland fires, searches, etc. So that's a really important facet of the job that we really, think is special.
So I know reducing fire risk is something important. Obviously, the burn ban does that by having people not start fires in particular, but we also look at the broader forest health aspects and work to do, I think, prescribed burns, right? Can you talk a little bit about why those are important and how we approach that forest management to reduce that fire risk?
Yeah, prescribed burns, we do them for a myriad of reasons, for mitigation from wildland fire and also for habitat for certain wildlife. We have become very active in the prescribed fire role in the last couple of years. This year alone, we've already conducted 35 prescribed fires, and we're on task to do quite a bit more, not even being halfway through the year. So it's a program that we're growing and has been really beneficial for a lot of communities.
So before we transition to all the other aspects of what the forest rangers do here in the state, what does the fire outlook look like in the state for this year?
It's kind of hard to say. It's always weather dependent, and I think we're on the overall climatological outlook is for kind of an average year maybe, but we're also ahead of schedule, or we're ahead of where we were the last couple of years in terms of number of fires. So it all depends, especially in the spring and fall. It only takes a couple days of dry weather for the lighter fuels to really become available. So the time of year that we tend to have the most number of fires, long-term trends don't necessarily matter that much.
Getting ready to hit the trails? Before you head out on your next adventure, it's important to be prepared and make sure you have the 10 hiking essentials. Carry the following in your pack to ensure a safe and enjoyable experience for all. Navigation, such as a map or compass, insulated clothing and rain gear, a light source with extra batteries, first aid supplies, emergency kit, fire starting supplies, food, water, sun and insect protection, and an emergency shelter. To learn more, visit dec.ny.gov and search Hike Smart for more information.
All right, so obviously forest rangers are wildland firefighters, but you also have a lot of other important roles that you do. What else do our New York State forest rangers do?
Well, we're heavily involved in search and rescue, especially in the region that Chuck and I work, Region 5, and we also do law enforcement on vast state lands.
That's the Adirondacks for the uninitiated.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, the Adirondack State Park.
So you just mentioned law enforcement. So forest rangers are actually New York State police officers, is that correct?
Yep, or DCJS, that's the Department of Criminal Justice Services, certified as state jurisdiction. So we can enforce all the laws of New York State, but we do tend to focus on our, state land regulations and environmental conservation law.
So talk to us a little bit about how to become a forest ranger and why you two wanted to become a forest ranger in particular. Like what got you interested in this position and field?
Well, I was lucky enough to meet the gentleman sitting right next to me when I was about 15 years old, and I was a camper at one of the DEC camps in Pack Forest up in Warrensburg, New York. The camp brought Chuck in to do a presentation on being a forest ranger, and his enthusiasm was so intense, and his passion for the job was so that it just stayed with me. And after going to Pack Forest, I became interested in the environment. I ultimately studied environmental science in college and took the civil service exam as soon as I was able to, and went down the path. But it was this guy right here, Chuck, that was the first forest ranger I met.
Oh, Chuck, what about you?
Well, it's a good thing you can't see me blush over there through the microphone. My journey was a little bit longer. I kind of stumbled around trying to figure out what I wanted to do, for a career. And eventually I was on a hike with my father and some other folks on Mount Marcy, and we ran into an assistant forest ranger on the summit. And my dad said, "Oh, you should go talk to her." And I said, I don't know. So I did. I went over and I found out that, at that time, holy cow, there's a job where you can do search and rescue for a living and fight wildland fire and get paid for it. And I said, holy cow, that's what I want to do. So the next fall, I went to SUNY ESF to the Ranger School in Wanakena, got my forestry degree, and a year later, I was on the job as a forest ranger.
And to your question about becoming a forest ranger, we do have some very specific education requirements. All that information can be found on the New York State Civil Service website. But if you do meet those requirements, you would take a civil service exam, and then based on your score, you would go through the hiring process. There's some background checks, and then there's a 6-month paramilitary police academy. Our Forest Ranger Academy is up in Wanakena, New York, a very beautiful spot. And then we do transition to Newcomb. And it's a great, very highly intensive 6 months, but you come out, ready to go. There's still a lot of training. I'm sure Chuck can attest to this. You're learning throughout your entire career, but those 6 months, you get a lot of valuable skills.
I will say I had the opportunity this past summer to spend some time with the Forest Ranger recruits. However, I did learn a valuable lesson. And
Yes, you did.
Oh my God. So when you walk into these situations, right, the recruits at paramilitary, right, everyone's at attention all times. The recruits were like staring straight ahead as I proceeded to talk to them for probably 10 to 15 minutes of
At
giving a
least.
speech. And then finally the person behind me got up and said, "Relax." And then you saw them all sink their shoulders and like fall in their chairs. And I'm like, oh, I felt so horrible that I let them stay there in that attention the whole time.
Yeah, our academy, it's a certain way where we do try to have some structure, but then once you become a forest ranger, we very much encourage and support people to be making decisions on their own, because oftentimes you're going to be in charge on your first couple months out of the academy. You might be in charge of a fire in your area, so you need to start learning to make those decisions. And that's, you do gain a lot of that experience in the academy, but the most valuable experience you gain is when you're in the field.
Definitely.
Want the latest news in air quality? Sign up for DEC Delivers to receive Airmail, DEC's monthly air quality newsletter, which includes information on air quality and other air-related issues in New York State. Sign up today by visiting dec.ny.gov and search DEC Delivers.
Let's talk a little bit more about search and rescue. That is definitely one of the key functions of the forest ranger, is helping lost people in the backcountry, in the woods, right? What are some of the most common things that people fail to do or fail to bring with them that results in a call and hopefully a tidbit in the ranger highlights?
Well, I think some of the most common things that we see are people forget to bring headlamps, start too late in the day, don't have a clear plan of where they're going, and aren't able to navigate with analog tools. So in other words, the cell phone dies and people don't really know how to get where they need to go. That's probably a large number of the incidents that we see. And then beyond that, sometimes people do everything right and just accidents happen.
Check out the DEC website. We've got lots of tips and guidance for hiking smart in all kinds of weather. There are winter hiking smart tips, fall, summer, etc. dec.ny.gov.
So, search and rescues, weekly highlights. My personal goal is obviously never to appear in a weekly highlight, so I've become an overpacker.
Did either of you have a mentor among the rangers that you'd like to share with us?
I've had the good fortune to have a number of really important mentors over the years. One of the key mentors for me, of course, was Robbie Mikas, who just passed away a year ago today, as of the time, as we're recording. And Robbie really ingrained in me, or really identified with Robbie's kind of passion for the job and her interest in just constant improvement and development of both herself as a ranger and the ranger program, broadly speaking. So absolutely, Robbie Mikas was one of my most significant mentors.
Yeah, Robbie is, a true legacy as the Forest Rangers, but anywhere you go in the Keene Valley area, Robbie's presence really hangs heavily over there. Yeah, she was an inspiration to many up there, and obviously many Forest Rangers as well, and always a helpful person to find in the woods. I was always impressed every time I had the opportunity to spend some time with Robbie. Definitely miss her.
It's a simple request. Flip your outdoor light switches off and help protect migrating birds. We're reminding New Yorkers to participate in the Lights Out initiative to help migrating birds navigate the night sky safely. Many species of shorebirds and songbirds rely on constellations to help navigate to and from their summer breeding grounds throughout the state. Excessive outdoor lighting, especially in adverse weather conditions, can cause migrating birds to become disoriented, a phenomenon known as fatal light attraction. According to several studies, fatal light attraction can lead to collisions with windows, walls, floodlights, or the ground, and the death of more than 1 billion birds annually in the U.S. Do your part and turn your lights off. Learn more about how you can make your home bird-friendly by visiting dec.ny.gov and search birds.
But back on the Ranger highlights, back on, search and rescues and things. We heard some wildland firefighting stories from you, but what's your favorite search and rescue story to tell? And, what really sums up the...
Or the wackiest.
Yeah, we often get asked this question, and you don't really want to necessarily share a lot of the details of some of these, for people's privacy and things like that. But I will say that some of my favorite memories of being a forest ranger are when the outcomes are not so great, but it really, that's really when I feel like we shine. We go in, we're asked to, recover a body, and, no one knows how it's going to get done, but we figure it out. And that's when I find the most pride in what I do, is when we're, tackling a task or a problem, and we're working together really well. And, a lot of the time the outcome is not great, but I go home feeling really proud of what we've done regardless.
I think we pulled off some pretty amazing rescues and things over the years. One of the things that I just can never seem to get over is just the great emotional feeling when you get that call across the radio, or maybe even, one of us, you find that person that we were really concerned about their well-being, and we locate that person alive and condition that we can actually, do a rescue and get them out of the woods safely. It's really an amazing feeling, and it's something that the kind of emotional release and that you get from that is just really impossible to describe. I can remember one early in my career in Region 5. We were out looking for a gentleman who'd spent the night out on the summit of Mount Marcy. And I got the 1 o'clock in the morning phone call, get up to the top of the mountain for daylight. And we lined out to start a sweep of the summit. And 20 below weather, terrible, winds blowing. And I took a step forward because I couldn't see the ranger next to me. And this guy wearing a yellow coat stands up. And I said, "Are you the guy we're looking for?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, stay there." And I just could not believe that, we're looking, quite honestly, we're concerned that this is a body that we're looking for.
Right.
And he was alive, and we managed to package him up and fly him out. And those kinds of things just really stick with you,
Yeah, I had been given I believe it was a 3-day, 2-night overnight assignment in the West Canada Lakes a couple years ago. And it was spring. The conditions were not great. A lot of snow melt, and it had been raining on top of it. And it was the second day. We had woken up in the lean-to. We were packing up our bags, getting ready to start, and it was rainy, and drinking coffee. And someone walks around the corner of the lean-to, and we go, "Are you so-and-so?" And he goes, "Yeah." We go, "We've been looking for you." And it was a great feeling, One, you're getting out of there today, and you found the person you were looking for. Actually, he found us, so it was a really fun experience.
Now, Chuck, I believe you've got another story that you may have told us while we were prepping here, and you broke me before when you told me. So, part of what we do, obviously, DEC has a number of campgrounds across the state. Definitely check out dec.ny.gov for where you can go and explore and enjoy camping in the state. But Chuck, what's your one campsite story?
The wackiest call I ever had at one of the campgrounds was we got a call that there was a person in the campground, a camper, dressed in a bear suit, stealing food from coolers in other people's campsites.
You can't make that up.
You cannot make this
A
stuff
for
up.
effort.
For sure.
Yep.
And there also may or may not be a photo of me somewhere in my ranger uniform throwing up in a helicopter. I am prone to motion sickness, and it got the better of me. And my coworker figured the best thing to do in that moment was take some photos.
Was
so
to shame you.
yeah, so that'll be on my retirement announcement one day, I'm sure.
says
I see a
love.
conservationist cover in your
Yeah,
future,
for sure.
Nancy.
But Nancy, I would say, photogenic as well. Didn't you happen to be one of the stars of the Forest Rangers who got to make an appearance recently?
Yeah, you never really know what this job is going to lead you to. And, I didn't know I'd be sitting here on a podcast on a Friday afternoon. And similarly, after Chuck and I went to California at the end of 2027, it was a particularly bad fire year there. Napa and Sonoma counties had burned a lot. And all of a sudden got a call that we were going to be going to the Glamour Women of the Year Awards in New York City. And before I know it, I'm sitting there with Nicole Kidman to my right and Martha Stewart behind me.
Like
And-
any other day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I did, in my Forest Ranger dress uniform, and getting a standing ovation with 3 of my female coworkers, and I never expected that to happen. So you really don't know what this job is going to lead you to.
Well, you never know where it's going to take you, but Nancy, Chuck, I'm glad that it brought you to us today on the podcast. DEC Does What. It's been great to have you guys on talking about what it's like to be a forest ranger. Definitely, listeners, check out dec.ny.gov for more information on our forest rangers. Check out our weekly highlights. Check out our social media pages, too. There's a lot of great information and pictures out there of the great work that our forest rangers are doing day in and day out across the state. We'll let you get back to it because I know we're coming up on a weekend here in the springtime. There's going to be people out and about, and I imagine we'll be getting some significant incident reports from you all this weekend, but wish you both well and can't thank you enough for all you do on behalf of all New Yorkers here.
Thank you for everything you do.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us. It was fun.
DEC Does What is a production of DEC's Division of Communication, Education, and Engagement. Our theme music is an original composition by Mike Menza, Environmental Program Specialist with DEC's Division of Fish and Wildlife. Like what you heard on this episode? Please leave a review and share this episode with others. Want to learn more about DEC's wide-ranging efforts to protect New Yorkers and the environment? Visit dec.ny.gov or connect with us on social media. You can find us using @NYSDEC. For more information on DEC Does What, visit dec.ny.gov/podcast.